Well, good afternoon or good morning, everyone. Kapila, can you hear me okay?
Yes, then it's very clear.
Okay, good. Thank you. Welcome, everyone. Delighted to have you at this for this webinar focusing on mindfulness as a leadership practice. And hello, Helen. I see you there. So welcome. So we're going to talk about mindfulness as it relates to leadership. I'd like to just do a few housekeeping chores here and to remind you to mute your phones, to please send comments, questions, thoughts through the chat, and make sure it's sent to everyone, not just to one person, so that we can engage in a conversation as best we can with this technology. I want it to be as interactive as possible. So I will invite you to, if you do have comments, questions throughout the webinar, please just write in the chat so we can engage in conversation, okay? And my colleague and dear friend Kapila is on as well, and at the end he will put up a very brief poll so that you can give us some feedback on this particular webinar, on the topic, on any way you think we can improve. So anyway, it's very brief, but we would appreciate if you would do it, okay? All right. Okay, so welcome to Mindfulness as a Leadership Practice. So here's the agenda we have for our time together. We want to define mindfulness. We want to talk a little bit about and just present very quickly, there's incredible amounts of research on mindfulness. So I have, you know, it is very much going mainstream. It's in companies, hospitals, schools. So we'll talk a little bit about what the research says about mindfulness. And then we will look at mindfulness and meditation as, you know, why it matters to leadership. We will look at mindful leaders based upon a Harvard study that really demonstrates how if you incorporate mindfulness into your leadership, that practice will improve organizations. You will have a more effective and productive organization, and you'll have a happier staff. In this case, you'll have happier members. You will have people that stay. So it's a good retention tool. And then I'd like to turn it over to all of you to hear your voices, your ideas, your questions, your stories. What have you heard about mindfulness? You know, what do you engage in a mindfulness practice? If you could share your thoughts about that, we would be delighted. We'll talk a little bit about future of work, mindfulness as a leadership practice. It is becoming integral to being a successful leader. And then an action step, the power of one. I'd like you to think about at the end of this what might be one step. Maybe it's read a book, maybe it's starting to meditate for 2 minutes, whatever it is that you could sort of clarify one step you will take to begin to integrate mindfulness into your leadership work as VISTA leaders. Okay. And then I have some resources for further study. Okay. All right. So John Kabat-Zinn, he is known just a brilliant, you know, a scientist who started mindfulness in his work with people who were at University of Massachusetts Medical School, and he started with doing workshops for people who had a lot of pain, chronic pain, and that's how he this mindfulness-based stress reduction, MBSR, has started, and it is now all over the world. And I would encourage you, if there is a course that you want to take to strengthen your own practice and to strengthen your own leadership competence, the mindfulness-based stress reduction workshop is phenomenal. It is 8 weeks. You can now do it all online. It's quite powerful. I have done it, and it has helped my own practice incredibly, and I learned so much. It was very transforming. So his definition, as we see here, is mindfulness is paying attention in a particular way, on purpose, in the present moment, and non-judgmentally. So the non-judgmentally is the hard part. You know, we have to be able to observe our own thoughts without, you know, judgment, without remarks and comments and editing. So the practice of mindfulness, the more you do it, the greater the benefits. You know, it can be starting with a handful of minutes, 2 minutes, 3 minutes, whatever you decide to start is going to be fine. Consistency is important. If you could devote, you know, 3 minutes a day, you know, when do you do that? But try and do it on a regular time each day. It does improve mental focus and reduces mind wandering. And quite frankly, with today's technology, our technology has caused like an epidemic level of self-distraction. We are constantly distracted and bombarded with information from so many different ways. So I think that's one of the reasons the ability to focus your mind and quiet your mind is very powerful, especially for people who are in leadership positions, as you all are. It's about getting into the present moment, which we rarely are in. We are concerned for what happened in our past, or we are worried and anxious about what's going to happen in the future. And the present moment, as John Kabat-Zinn says all the time, is all we have. We only have this moment. And now we're in another moment, and that's what we have. So as we can see here, the mindfulness it's just all over. It's used in medicine, in science, workplace. I have to add schools here. It's in now schools. Starting as young as kindergarten, teaching children to have moments of quiet where they can focus on the moment. Very powerfully done. They've actually used this in schools. When a child is sent to detention, there's a whole district. If a child has been misbehaving, and instead of going to detention, what they do at detention is teach mindfulness. And it's worked remarkably well and had very powerful results. So as you see all this list of companies here, it's pretty, you have Google and Apple and all the high-tech companies, but also huge companies, huge business companies, and universities, medical schools, part of teaching doctors. Steve Jobs was an avid meditator, as is Arianna Huffington from the Huffington Post. They're both, you know, Arianna still, of course, is just a proponent and advocate. Actually, Steve Jobs talks about in the biography of by Walter Isaacson how much meditation and mindfulness helped him with ideas and helped him get to his intuitive self that was creative, and in part how it impacted his work at Apple. So it's being taught and practiced in a growing number of organizations worldwide in order to improve personal and professional effectiveness. What does it take to be a good leader? What are some of the skills that it takes to be a good leader? So our understanding of what it takes to be a good leader evolves. We're finding that effective leadership requires self-knowledge, self-awareness, which is one of the most critical pieces of a successful leader, being self-aware. How do you practice that? How do you build on that? You build on that through mindfulness meditation. So, yeah, Steve Jobs, that's a great biography. If you haven't read it, it's quite fascinating. So So let me just stop a second here. Any questions, concerns? Please just put it in the chat for us. And I'm checking it right now. I don't see anything, but thank you for listening so patiently. And please feel free to chime in. So growing importance of mindfulness, again, all the organizations that are integrating this into their staff meetings, into their trainings, into their development of their people. And it proves that the decreased stress levels by 28%, productivity 62 minutes per employee per week. These are what researchers have found is happening because of the growing practice of mindfulness. So much of our leadership, we get from our leadership development, we get from sort of outside ourselves, the internet and podcasts and books and Facebook groups and networking communities. And although this information is absolutely great, have you stopped to consider that perhaps the most important catalyst to your greatest leadership potential resides within you rather than outside you? So that is a critical piece. And a recent discovery by Harvard researchers have found that our ability to see ourselves clearly leads to increased confidence and creativity, better decision-making, stronger communications, and healthier relationships. The most self-aware leaders enjoy more effective leadership, they're happier, more connected staff, and ultimately, for companies and businesses, have more profitable bottom lines. So this is not just a, sort of feel-good practice. This is actually improving the effectiveness of organizations. All right, so Thich Nhat Hanh, the Buddhist monk, the longest journey you will ever take is the 18 inches from your head to your heart. I love that quote, and I love his, he has many practices. He has lots of books, and even with children, practicing with children to teach them mindful movements. Because mindfulness meditation can also be walking meditation. It does not necessarily mean you have to sit on a pillow. So two primary types of self-awareness: internal self-awareness and external self-awareness. Okay, and by let me just move on to the next one. Okay. The science of mindfulness. Again, all these incredible, there's a plethora of materials and research on mindfulness and on the way it changes your brain from anger and anxiety toward a sense of calm and well-being. If you have been watching, and thankfully those Thai, the soccer group in Thailand that was trapped in that cave, the coach was a monk and taught those little boys to meditate so that they could keep calm. They could have a sense of well-being, and they could conserve their energy. And they are praising that coach for helping the boys, sort of control their emotions, to not panic. So that was incredibly, if you talk about demonstrating the power of mindfulness, I thought that was very, very, very important and very touching, and thank goodness they're all out. So let me just put some thoughts out there. Anybody have any questions? Oh, I see Lucas. Hi, Lucas. What are some strategies toward working within an environment who are not mindful or self-aware? Okay, Lucas, that's a great question. Really, it all starts with you. Like, as the leader, the more you develop your own ability to practice your own mindfulness, That will help you be calm. That will help you become a better listener. And that, in essence, becomes a role model. Also, with your vistas, you can actually introduce, you could introduce, let's see, a 3-minute or even a 60-second way to have a present pause. Okay, you have a present pause. So before you start a meeting, can you all hear me okay?
Yes, Denise.
Thank you. So before you start a meeting, you do a 60-second presence pause, or we can call it a purposeful pause. And so that is a way you start building the practice into your organizational staff meetings, into creating those spaces where people can slow down and take a breath. Okay. Thanks, Lucas. Great question. Okay. So again, researchers show that it rebuilds your brain's gray matter. Mindfulness practices teach our brain to pop out of the old thought patterns, and that's why it increases your creativity. It regrooves your neurological pathways or networks. So better organizations, happier staff. So mindfulness is proven to help leaders reduce their stress. And we know in Vistas, our Vistas have so much to do. As Vista leaders, you are really doing so much hard work with people who are struggling with poverty. So it's really important to take care of yourself, to develop your own ability to practice this mindfulness so that your stress level is reduced. It creates a workplace culture. At Google, they have, they have times allotted for meditation throughout the day. And one of the things to look at the Google YouTube. I have this at the end on the resources. Google YouTube, John Kabat-Zinn, and it shows his workshop that he did at Google, and it is incredible. Oh, and yes, there is a cost. The MBSR is about it's about $300. You can start looking at it online, which is a little cheaper. But if you can do it, I would do it in person. But if that's cost prohibitive, and I would actually, reach out to people, tell them you're a Vista leader, really try and get some scholarship. There's ways to do it. People, this is all over the world now, the MBSR, and it's invaluable to take. So again, mindfulness, it's, psychological capital, hope, optimism, self-efficiency, efficacy, and resilience. And look at the resilience those little boys have in that coach from doing that, from, keeping them calm. Like when I heard about the rescuers going in, they found the boys sitting there meditating. So really powerful stuff, just wonderful. This woman's, her book, Finding the Space to Lead, is just an incredible resource. And I've heard her speak. She's quite wonderful. I've heard John Kabat-Zinn, too, who is just amazing. But this woman, before she started her Mindful Leadership Institute, was in charge of General Mills out in Minneapolis. And she ran this huge company. And she started with mindfulness as part of the culture. And because of that, she decided she needed to leave her job there and start this whole Mindful Leadership Institute. And she is now traveling the world, teaching people how to include this in their lives to strengthen their leadership. And she talks about it building a leadership presence that clarity, the focus, creativity, compassion. Okay, that's all good stuff and just very powerful. So leadership practice in mindfulness. As we've said here, stress reduction, and that's been proven time and time again. Self-awareness, which is one of the key attributes of a successful leader, of a leader who is going to be able to be the best they can be and build cultures, if you will, of mindfulness, cultures of, presence, of listening, of, being creative, being compassionate. And then greater empathy for self, and that's also so important. We don't have a lot of, we have empathy for others, but often ourselves we beat up a lot. We're not very hard on ourselves. So it's something to think about. How do you build empathy for yourself? How do you, because by doing that as a leader, you, again, don't forget your role models for your business. So empathy for yourself, acceptance, genuine curiosity to know yourself without judging. That sort of quieting your mind helps you really observe, what am I thinking and feeling, and what's that about, and being curious. Not like, oh, I did this wrong, or something like that. Manage our energy. This is an important one as well. The more self-awareness you have of your own thoughts, emotions, it allows you to manage your energy, okay? It allows you to do that. Becoming a better listener, understanding ourselves and others, really building that emotional intelligence piece. Okay, so strongly engage others. When we recognize our own judgments and stories about others, we develop the capacity to make a choice in those judgments. We're able to connect more meaningfully and authentically with others. Creating distance between thought and action. This shows the power of a purposeful pause. Often we act without reflection. We're like on autopilot most of the day. That's why introducing these purposeful pauses is so important. The practice of mindfulness makes us aware of the state of being we are in. It helps us pause to decide whether action is needed and is it the right action. So intuition, you can't say enough about, and Steve Jobs talks about this in that biography by Walter Isaacson. He talks a lot about using his intuition to create Apple, to do that. It was part of the way he did it. He says, Steve Jobs, I began to realize that an intuitive understanding and consciousness was more significant than abstract thinking and intellectual, logical analysis. Intuition, very powerful and a huge impact in my work at Apple. And then embrace and adapt to change. Change is everywhere. As leaders, we have to embrace it. And of course, we talked about how the clarity and the focus. So now I would like to stop talking and hear from you through the chat. And please make sure the chat goes to everyone. What are your thoughts about mindfulness? What is your experience with it? Do any of you meditate or even just spend a few minutes with that purposeful pause? Any thoughts? Oh, this year. Oh, Lucas, you did okay, post-lunch break minutes. Oh, absolutely. The power lunch is no longer the power lunch of men going to lunch in fancy restaurants. This is about, the real power lunch is including meditation and including a mindfulness presence pause. Enjoying the meditation center. Wonderful. What else can you do? What can you do with your vistas? If you think about the power of even just a pause, it's got to be in my own work as a trainer that I include this with every training. Combating stress, absolutely, Andrew, yes. And what does it feel like to be centered? What does it feel like when you take that pause? Worry about pushback, okay. Yeah, how do you encourage vistas? Well, you might journal, prompts, breathing. Okay, very good. Oh, Jessica, thanks, that's great. The journaling is important, breathing. Pacifica.com is a great app. There's also Headspace and Calm, both great apps. These are wonderful ideas. Yeah, I mean, you still have to role model. You could present, some research about how important it is, and just present it as a stress management tool. Present to vistas who might be a little like, oh, that stuff's silly or whatever. Present it as a stress management tool, and make it part of your culture. Make it part of your meetings, just as I see lots of you are doing here. This is excellent. Yeah, Headspace and Calm are also good. If those of you that, let's see, thanks for the ideas. I like making it a part of the culture. Absolutely. It's almost like when you set the agenda for, say, a staff meeting or a training, part of that agenda is, we come together, we sit quietly for 60 seconds. Everyone sits quietly, closes their eyes and counts 60 seconds. That alone, just stopping for 60 seconds is powerful. And as Lucas is saying, fresh air, getting the blood, absolutely. You could even do like a walking meditation. Yes, absolutely. You have to. In order to be the best leader you can be, in order to thrive as a leader and have energy and resilience, you need to integrate mindfulness meditation into your life and into those. Loves the journal prompt, I notice. Oh, I love that. Very good, Jessica. Yes, I notice. There's also one that says, I see you, because it's also about presence and listening and, really, like I really see you and I notice. Absolutely. The mindful pause is truly listening with like a laser-like focus. It's you're focused on that person. You are present for that person. You see, in quotes, you see that person. You notice, as you were saying before, that person. Yes, absolutely. There's many ways to integrate mindfulness meditation. It can be a walking meditation. It can be, the 60-second. It's not one size, as Andrew says, it's not one size that fits all. There are many methods, and you have to find out what works and what you're going to decide, and then make it consistently part of your meetings, part of your trainings. I end my trainings all the time now with a 2-minute guided meditation, and it's about a walk in the woods. And at first I was a little nervous about it because it was with a big group. It's about 100 Civic Corps members in New York City. And I thought, is this going to work? It was incredibly powerful, and they wanted more and more because they had that 2 minutes to get away from, to remove themselves from the stress, from their thoughts of like, am I good enough? Am I doing this right? To come back to be more confident, more creative, like more ready to move forward. So very, very good. Thank you for all these ideas and what you do. That's wonderful. Taking time to really listen. Do any of you include a purposeful pause or a presence pause regularly in your VISTA meetings or in your at your organization? So maybe you're just getting started on that good stuff. Okay. So other questions, other resources that you could share with your colleagues on our webinar, other maybe books that you've read, podcasts you've listened to, or anything about meditation or mindfulness that you could share? Okay, sounds like you're getting quiet there. All right, but this is good. Thank you for all that engaging and good ideas and opportunity to share thoughts with each other. Okay, so as a coach, I have always used, someone saying Fitbit iconic, and it has a breathe app. Okay, wonderful. That's a great tool, Jessica. Thank you for sharing that. So the power of 10, as a coach, I always use the power of 3 when I'm doing action plans with people, because I think 3 is something that is sort of a manageable number if you're making this self-development plan. But I called this the power of 10 because, and I'm pushing here, because you can do 2 minutes, you can do 3 minutes. But if you really want to have the most impact to in your work and see the results of this mindfulness practice, I would encourage you to carve out 10 minutes. You can sit comfortably. You don't need to sit on a pillow. You can sit on a chair, but bring your attention to your breath. And again, like we talked about, being curious of what you notice. And somebody said in the journal, I notice. Very great word. Thoughts, sensations, sounds that you don't control. You just want to notice. You want to see it. Like, well, look at that. I'm very curious about those thoughts and feelings that came up. So, and then when your attention goes away and it drifts and you have these thoughts coming in and you feel like you're going all over the place, that redirecting back to the breath, that process of redirecting that's the mindfulness practice. It's bringing it back. When you start doing that, that's what builds that capacity to get the fulfillment from mindfulness that you can. So that's very good. Thank you. All right. Okay, so the future of work. Looking at mindfulness as a leadership practice, as being integral to your development as a leader, not just in your VISTA Leaders program, which you're doing now, but for your future. It does start with you, because some people you're always going to have people that resist, that think this is touchy-feely, or think that this is, even though the research is extraordinarily not, but you're going to have people that feel uncomfortable. Because even though we say sitting is an easy thing to do, to sit and just try and be calm, it's actually not an easy thing to do, because your mind will drift, and you'll have to say, I'm just being curious, and pull it back. So it does start with you to try, if you would, to do the 10-minute practice daily. At work, maybe you have a little taster session. you make it fun. Just say, I'd like to try something with our staff meeting today. I'd like to incorporate something that might help us alleviate stress. And you do it in little sort of few minutes at a time. So you start slowly integrating it into your regular staff meetings or when there is a meeting. Okay, so like at Google and Apple and Intel and all those, they start their meetings with mindfulness meditation. And it could be 5 minutes, but that's where they start every single meeting so that they are not running from one room and one meeting to another, but they stop, they breathe, they clear their mind, they center themselves in their body, and then they start to do the work that they are there to do, and they do a better job. Okay, what to do when this has become frustrated? Okay, great question, Catherine. I really like that question. She's asking, what are some options for alternative pre-meeting meditation? And I want to hear what your colleagues say, but you may start with those that you might sense their resistance. You might ask them, look, I want us to have little breaks here and there in order to center ourselves and be the best we can be. So what are something like, ask them, what might be a way you could come to this meeting fully present? Is it doing an energizer like we do at PSO? So just to try and incorporate the pause, as a leader, is going to happen in some way or another, and then maybe you can work your way to sort of sitting quietly. But I would ask those that you sense are frustrated, what would work for you? We're trying to incorporate these practices to help us develop our leadership. So what might work for you, and have their voices be heard. Often when people are resisting, then they really just want to be listened to, okay? You can do a stand up and stretch, simple as that, instead of sitting, okay? So I hope that helps with some thoughts. At Google and all that, of course, they're huge places with actually campuses, but they have space for people to practice in the workplace. They encourage it as part of the culture. They encourage people to practice together. Samantha's, yeah. Yes, excellent, Samantha. Thank you. Just, again, ask the question, why? What's happening to you? What's making you feel uncomfortable? Thank you for responding to that. Okay, so facilitate a guided meditation for staff, and start with just a few minutes. And then ask people, how was that? Or maybe let people feel comfortable giggling a little bit, because at first it does feel a little bit like they're not used to doing that. No one, we're not used to trying to stop and renew. We're not used to doing that. We're like energizer bunnies that just go nonstop and do never renew ourselves, and that's going to hurt us. And it's starting to. That's why all this mindfulness research is so it's so valid. It's so credible and so important for us to do it. So again, mindful minute. I mentioned that before. 60 seconds. 60 seconds. Small get together, or even just count out loud 60 seconds. Then it starts building the practice of stopping, okay? Because you want to have, as leaders, you want to master attention. You want to have clarity of intention. You want to optimize the attitude, and you want to optimize emotional intelligence. And you want to integrate every domain of daily life and work and relationships. We are whole human beings. So this is why this is so critically important. All right. So now we have the power of 10, which we hope you all take 10 minutes out of your life to begin this. And, keep a little journal, like how did it go? And, and to hold yourself accountable to it. and set a timer. You use one of those little kitchen timers. They're very inexpensive, but just set a timer. Do that. Now, taking action, I have the power of one. I'd like you to think about and contribute, if you would. What's one takeaway from this conversation? Maybe something your peers suggested, something that, maybe it's just another question, but maybe it's a book that you'll read or to think about. What might be one thing you might take away from our conversation here today? I do monthly video calls. Okay. Okay, Sarah, that's great. Especially, you're geographically all over the country. I think that would be fabulous. And see how it goes. Let me know. I would love to. Lucas, yes, absolutely. Convey confidence in yourself and your intuition and celebrate that. I mean, that's, a lot of times intuition is referred to as your gut level response or something, but that is, that's very powerful. Look what Steve Jobs did with it, so very powerful. Fun or funny. Oh, I like that idea. This is you guys are so absolutely awesome. This is wonderful. Okay. How do you make it funny? How would you make mindfulness funny? So I'd love to hear some of others of what you think about that. Focus on your little toe for 60 seconds. Let me tell you what we did with the mindfulness-based stress reduction class. That was my 8-week class in mindfulness. We shared a raisin. Like, we went around and in a cup we each took one raisin, and we put the raisin in our mouth, and we tried to focus on the texture of it, the feel of it. And at first it was silly and funny, and we felt this is really weird. But it really did bring some humor, and it really got through to us that this is the present moment. This is it. And what's the texture? What's the, really getting into that. Yeah, people think it's lame. I like the little toe idea. I like also Thich Nhat Hanh has a thing for children, and you could use it for vistas. I mean, we use it for adults. It doesn't matter. It's mindful movements, and it has sort of silly ways to move, not very hard, but they're silly, but you're still focusing on that moment. So that might be a way to go too. Yeah, great idea. These are wonderful ideas, and I'm really glad you're going to start this and make it part of, it can be fun, but make it, people will start seeing the effect of it, and that you as a leader are saying, this is important, this is the way our culture is going to be, that we will take time to renew. So I love that. Oh, Sam and Samantha. Okay. Okay. So great start, and I like the idea of making it funny. What's ever going to work? Maybe you can ask even your folks to come up with their own 60-second pause. What do they want to do? Can they think of creative ideas of how to get started in a meeting that does have everyone come together and have a pause, have a presence pause or a purposeful pause. Okay. These are great. Thank you. I'm excited you're going to get started. All right, so some resources, and I know we talked about a few. I did mention Calm is a great app. There is Headspace, which is a great app to look at. Of course, John Kabat-Zinn, who is almost a sort of, I don't want to say guru because he's so unassuming, he's so brilliant, but he's, really is like world famous now. You can hardly get to see him at a workshop. He is, it's, he's like a rock star. He is a rock star. Full Catastrophe Living is an amazing book. Wherever you go, there you are. I would start with that one. Again, YouTube on, and you could just Google it and watch John Kabat-Zinn at you can Google it at his work at Google. And it's very, very powerful. There he is at this hyper speed place, ideas flying around, and he just brings everyone back to the moment. It's quite powerful to watch. And there's his mindfulness-based stress reduction course. If you can take it, please take it. It is worth every penny that you spend, and hopefully you could even get some scholarship. Look around. It is online now too. Finding the Space to Lead, excellent book. And she started the Institute for Mindful Leadership. David Rock, Your Brain at Work. Really good stuff and good ideas as you were trying to think of ideas of what to do to build that mindfulness moment in your staff meetings. And then for you yourself, start with that 10 minutes so that you're building the experience and see the impact of it pretty quickly. So that will help you influence and promote this at your work. All right, questions, concerns, what are your thoughts? What are you, any questions, ideas, other resources to share? Oh, Pema Chodron too, her book, When Things Fall Apart, is outstanding. And she has a lot of guided meditations. And as she said, we don't sit in meditation to become good meditators. We sit to become more awake to our lives, which I think is so powerful. Her books are amazing. So what else is on your mind? What questions? Share some thoughts, some ideas before we close. Yes, mastering attention and optimizing intention. Yeah, that's a fantastic tool for this. Absolutely, Catherine, it is. Oh, mindfulness coloring. That's a great idea. Absolutely. Yeah, that's also very focused, very calming. There's this whole movement of the coloring books. I have a lot myself. $1 books at the Dollar Tree. There you go. These are awesome ideas. Thank you. Yeah, just awesome. All right, let's see if I'm just looking if there's any other resources I wanted to share with you before. But please, let's see, I have if anybody wants this PowerPoint, I don't know if this is helpful to you. How do you achieve mindfulness with visitors 2 to 4 hours away? Judy, that's a good question. Again, you start with you build your own practice. Again, if you're getting your visitors on your calls, starting a webinar, or whatever, you can take that 60-second pause to say, I just want everybody to take a deep breath and to just center themselves so we can sort of transition from one thing to another. Again, start with yourself and then start with small things. And maybe ask the question, I'd like to start some mindfulness activities. What are some of the things you've heard? And let them voice things, because then they own it. It's always a good way to have their voices be heard. I'm going to put my email address in here. It is in the front, but just in case. If this PowerPoint is helpful to you in any way, please let me know. Just send me an email and I'll send it off to you if it's helpful, and you could customize however you would want. That's a great quote. I love that. If you could call it perfection, what would it look like? Foster care girls and kids. Oh my God, that is awesome. Thank you for sharing that. That's very powerful. And another thing is sometimes you can actually, if people are very frantic and, you come to a meeting and everybody's coming from another meeting, you can even say something like, let's just have a seat and, if it's in, has natural light, maybe the sun is coming in, you could say, do you feel the sun on your face? Like it makes people stop and think, oh, the sun on my face? Like, we're so busy, we don't think of those kind of very powerful things. But, yes, have you noticed the breeze that is coming through the window? Have you noticed the color of the in this room? Anything that sort of starts people to focus. But I love that quote. How would you know it? How would you feel it? That's what does it look like? What does it feel like? Sort of coming back to your senses, if you will, right? Okay, thank you for these suggestions. How would you know it? How would you feel it? How would you be it? Print out quotes on cardstock and give them out at the end of my. Wow, this is awesome. Quotes are always very powerful. I use a lot of quotes in my work too. Very good. And have people bring their own quotes. Perfection quote cards. There you go. You have a lot. I do too. I use actually art postcards and put quotes on your Facebook. Yeah, I do that as well. Yeah, I mean, and just listening to a quote, it does pull you back into what matters or what's important when you're in sort of the frenzy of our overly busy multitasking world and the way that we are bombarded with information. So quotes. All right, these are awesome. Great suggestions and ideas. Thank you all so much. Is there anything else that I will, if there's not, I will ask my colleague Kapila to put up the brief survey, and if you wouldn't mind sharing your thoughts, we would be grateful for that. But before I ask Kapila, is there anything else you would like to say? How are you feeling right now? You're going to do some deep breathing right now. Maybe start after this webinar with your 10 minutes. Start, or even just start with 5, but just start, okay, that was good. What am I going to take in from this? Anything else to share with your colleagues? Oh, yes, absolutely, and great conversation. Despite being on a webinar, I thought it was a great conversation. Thank you all so much for sharing those great ideas. And really, this is powerful stuff. So please, I encourage you all, read more, take some guided meditations, really really look into this because this is developing you, and this stays with you forever. This is not just your Vista term. And thank you, Mark. Thank you, Diamond. Thank you. All right. Okay, Kapila, if I may, if you're there. Are you there? Kapila?
Yes, Janice. I just opened the poll.
Oh, okay.
And
Thank
you.
you. All right, and I will sign off, but I thank you all for joining us today, and all my best wishes for you to develop your mindfulness practice. Thank you.
Thank you, Janice, and have a great weekend, everyone.
Yes, have a great weekend.